Within the next 10 years, gamers will regard games that give them no ownership of their own assets as an archaic model, a theft of their virtual property rights, and will refuse to move backwards. Right now, Web3 gaming is like an awkward teenager in middle school. They have braces, they're a little bit socially uncomfortable, and they don't have a lot of friends. They also are a straight-A student, a member of the chess club, and they're reselling candy at lunchtime in order to be able to fund their first car purchase. Do you have a mental picture yet? No doubt it's a tough time for them right now. But if you look closely, you can tell there's a lot of potential once the rough edges get smoothed out. In this cast on the state of gaming, we'll talk about why Web3 gaming will eventually come to dominate the entire gaming industry. During this, we'll use my map of the gaming universe that I shared. If you missed that episode, the link is in the description below. So let's get right to it and talk about what Annie knows about why Web3 gaming is inevitable. In our last episode, I outlined my map of the gaming universe. On the vertical axis, you can see the different monetization strategies that gaming companies have used for different genres and titles over time. And on the horizontal axis, you can see different asset ownership models. I'll call your attention to the far right where Web3 gaming sits today. Right now, Web3 gaming is in an awkward phase. There are very few games that have quality that even comes close to mainstream traditional games, and so it's unable to actually attract players to the space. However, with $6.5 billion in funding raised over the last 5 quarters, many crypto gaming studios will emerge that can compete with traditional games. I believe that Web3 gaming is inevitable because once you begin to own your own in-game assets, you're going to have no desire to move back to a gaming ecosystem that doesn't allow that. If the quality of gameplay is anywhere close to similar to traditional games, gamers will begin to migrate and demand that gaming studios give them ownership over the items that they actually acquire. The gaming industry has been able to ignore asset ownership model changes and decentralization that have revolutionized many industries, but that's about to change. First, let's look back at the 2 themes that have emerged over the 21st century. In the first decade, from 2000 to 2010, the major theme that would be on everyone's mind is the internet. And if you look across technologies, across industries, this has created trillions of dollars of wealth. What would you think is the second most transformative impact over the last 20 years? I would submit that as you look at the 2010s, it's actually the theme of decentralization. In fact, I would submit that decentralization has accounted for more industry upheaval than the internet itself has. But don't take my word for it. Let's look at some of the players that have shifted the game in several different sectors. In the field of media, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter have greatly surpassed newspapers, radios, and television stations. The amount of time spent consuming traditional media versus social media is now gone to more than double from half since 2011. As you can see in the graph here, we've seen a complete change in the entire industry shape. Centralized media companies have been surpassed by individuals with an iPhone. In the transportation sector, companies like Uber and Lyft have completely supplanted taxi companies and car rental agencies. And this has only happened since 2009. In fact, if you're listening to this video and you were going to travel to another city, you would almost certainly order an Uber or a Lyft when you arrived at the airport instead of going out to wait in a taxi stand. In the retail sector, eBay, Etsy, and Amazon have surpassed Kmart and Walmart by leaps and bounds. Even a semi-centralized marketplace like Amazon is merely aggregating millions of individual sellers in a decentralized way. In the US alone, 1.3 million workers have lost jobs in retail and moved to e-commerce instead. Revenue has increased in the e-commerce space by 5x since 2010. In the hospitality sector, anyone with a spare bedroom, rental house, or apartment has the opportunity to become a member of Airbnb or Vrbo and offer their accommodations to someone who's traveling. This has replaced hostels, hotels, and motels by usage across the globe. In the housing sector, Zillow and Apartments.com have completely replaced the MLS system for searching for houses. In banking, GoFundMe and Kickstarter are much more popular than going to JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, or Deutsche Bank to take out a loan. In the finance sector, we look to things like Venmo, Bitcoin, and Ethereum instead of Visa and MasterCard. In fact, in the last year alone, the Ethereum network did more transactions than the entire Visa network globally. In the art and design space, TikTok, Instagram, and Pinterest have replaced magazines as the go-to source for culture and fashion. And in manufacturing, now a decentralized approach is more possible than ever, with 3D printing or additive manufacturing available at relatively low cost and scale that will, over the next 5 years, continue to disrupt manufacturing worldwide. The specific nature of these changes varies by industry, as you can see, but running through all of it, decentralization is the key theme. Instead of having single, monolithic entities that build companies that cost millions of dollars and have a centralized point of failure, individual players within the market can enter or leave as they see fit. And that decentralization has had a sea change in value to us as consumers. In fact, we don't even have to move beyond the history of the gaming industry itself to see a parallel with what's going on today. In the 1970s and 80s, due to technical limitations, many individuals wanted to make the switch from the arcade to console games and computer game systems. However, it didn't really become mainstream until the mid-1980s. The reason for this is that microchip processing had to evolve, and the quality of gaming titles also had to follow along. In fact, with Atari 2600, ColecoVision, and Intellivision, there were so many consoles available in the early 1980s that we saw a bounce back to arcades for a 3-year time period. There were too many games and too few quality ones being produced. Many game developers had only a few weeks or months to develop and ship new titles. This got so bad over time that the entire Atari company ended up burying millions of games in the New Mexico desert in the US because they were unable to sell their titles. These were recently unearthed during some searches that were made. It sounds like a very similar problem to what we're seeing in the Web3 gaming space today. Too many games, not enough quality, too rushed timelines. Does that sound familiar to anyone? During the 1990s and the 2000s, gamers were also very reluctant to move to online games. Access to the internet was very slow for many across the world in the 1990s, and computer games and console processing power was a very limiting factor as well. But the prospect of having virtual and connected worlds to play with other people was too promising to ignore. Titles like RuneScape evolved, and these early games in the internet age allowed us to see the promise of having virtual worlds where you could interact and exchange goods with other people. And we as a gaming community haven't looked back since. This has become the norm and a baseline expectation for anyone launching a new game, that you would have virtual connectivity with others and that you would have the ability to have a virtual marketplace. And now, gamers have the potential for earning, moving, sharing, and selling assets within the gaming ecosystems that they're playing. Instead of Blizzard locking down World of Warcraft Gold, so in order to change it, you have to go to some sketchy black market, in the future, you'll be able to sell that gold for real-world income if you so desire. If you want to sell your Counter-Strike skins after you finish playing the game and are ready to move on to purchase a new map in Minecraft for your son, you have that option as well. In this future world, you're not going to have any desire to move back to situations in gaming companies where you no longer own the items that you've earned or worked for. Why would you choose to move back to where someone else owns property that you can own in a competitor game? Right now, the lack of quality games, difficulty of onboarding processes into the Web3 space, and a general unfamiliarity with crypto is holding gamers back from adoption. This all makes sense, but over time, these are not challenges, they're opportunities for enterprising companies to solve. Within the next 10 years, gamers will regard games that give them no ownership of their own assets as an archaic model, a theft of their virtual property rights, and will refuse to move backwards. So, while the exact timing of mass adoption of Web3 games isn't known, it's definitely fair to say that it is inevitable.
I am inevitable.
And if you want to be here for front row seats as this evolves over that next decade, feel free to like and subscribe my videos and join me as we talk about this moving forward. I'm Anamositas, and now you know what Annie knows about why Web3 gaming is inevitable.